Culture, Brian. Now, speaking of folks wanting to go a different route, whether or not it has to do with Heather or it has to do with Poltergeist and that whole fandom. There has been so much speculation and mystery surrounding Heather's tragic passing. What are your thoughts on the rumors and the conspiracy theories that continue to swirl around her from time to time?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's of course, going into it, we knew that there were some strong rumors going into it. And we even told the family, as documentarians, if we ever do come across anything that's true or that's like, not so flattering, we have a duty to present it. And they understood, they said that's fine. So we did, we didn't go into this project with any bit of a bias. We kind of, as documentarians, want to show things how they were. But we really went deep and kind of tried to even, we knew these rumors in the back of our head and pursued all of them, at least to see if there was any truth to any of it. And we went really deep and found nothing. I mean, we knew there'd be nothing, but at least we really went deep into anything that was being said and anything that's ever been really said about her death. I mean, I think it's really I mean, it's pretty clear what she died of. There's no question of it. And I think just for some reason, people I think are not satisfied with it because I think Heather's death angers a lot of people because it could have been prevented. Like Heather should not have died. It was
Mhm.
more of a misdiagnosis. And if they had diagnosed her correctly and the type of blockage that she had could have been corrected with a simple surgery. And Heather should be alive today. And that's, I think, what doesn't sit well with anybody. And so I think they look to blame someone else or try to think that there's maybe something more than what is the truth. And I think that's kind of where it comes from. And then, of course, just as Heather's, I think the reason why you wonder why they pick it on this poor girl, or it's really, I think, just Heather O'Rourke, not as a human, but as a pop culture figure. She was a young girl in horror movies and died at 12 and died while making a movie, and a movie that was kind of like an ironic death, kind of like Paul Walker dying in a car crash, kind of like she died and she
Yeah.
was starring in a movie where death is kind of after her. So it's kind of that irony kind of plays a part to it. But I think, and also usually everyone talks about there's always like that young little blonde girl is always kind of the one haunting houses and haunting sets. And so I think it's just kind of like her persona just opens herself to rumors. And then, of course, she worked in a time and in an era and with a lot of famous people like Steven Spielberg and Henry Winkler and some of these big names. So I think she kind of leaves not because of anything she did, but it just makes her very susceptible to be a target for rumors.
Agreed. It was a perfect storm that made her viable for that to happen. Unfortunately, people just took it way too far because, as we know, some of those speculations or blinds had to do with how did she really pass away, and because of those within the studio system, allegedly, which we all know not to be true. Because, as we discussed separately, Brian, if that was the case in the family's lawsuit and fight with the hospital, they would have brought that up, but they didn't
Of
do
course. I
that.
mean, the other side would have jumped on that so fast. I mean, if they would have said, and the thing is that was so great in general about kind of, being that they kept all the stuff from the lawsuit is we had medical records, we had medical examinations that were done on Heather a year before she passed away. I mean, any of these alleged things that happened would have showed up in all of these reports. And if the hospital was able to see or get even an inkling of some other possibility of any type of thing that led to her death other than the flat out misdiagnosis, they would have jumped on that so quickly because that would have cleared them. So, I mean, it's one of those things where just, logically, there's no truth to it. But of course, that doesn't really matter to people who are sitting behind a computer and just making up stuff and because it sounds good.
Mhm.
And the sad thing is, yeah, there was a ton of abuse that went on in the 80s on movie sets with different people, but just happy for Heather, that wasn't her story. She was very lucky that she was not only working with she worked with great people who were very protective, and also her mom was very protective. So, I mean, she was a very protected person and she just got lucky and worked with really great people. So it's kind of like it's a sad thing they kind of try to make her the face of abuse when she wasn't. It's kind of like it's just disrespectful to actual people who were abused, because it's kind of like that's not Heather's story.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It takes away from the others that are actual victims. Not to reference to what's going on today in pop culture, but even with the Puff Daddy Diddy case, who however you want to call him, rumor mills are going around so much. This person's a victim. This person's a victim. There's just so much speculation going around. It might be taken away from actual victims. But going back to Heather, Brian, there was also another rumor about grave robbing along those lines, and that both her father and her stepfather were there together. But another way to debunk that is they may have not necessarily been that friendly during that time period, as understandably things could be very awkward and, that type of situation. But it's just
Oh yeah,
lie after lie to feed a narrative.
yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of them you'll read and you'll just kind of roll your eyes because they just sound so false. But it's like, one of those things where, I mean, yeah, there was that little blind item that went on there about
Hmm.
something after she had passed away at the cemetery and desecrating her grave. I mean, it's disgusting for anyone to make it up. But I mean, it's like just kind of it's comical to me when I have so much knowledge, like personal knowledge about the family and how the situation was like. And just when you're reading some of these blind items, at least like, I'm able to read it and be like, I know this is false. Like this is false because of this. Like there's no way this is true. So it's kind of like, but then the question is, I mean, do you even bother even responding to it? Because it's kind of like, how much light do you want to give it? I mean, it's that's kind of the biggest, probably, I would say one of the biggest decisions and discussions that we had while making this documentary was how much light do you give some of these rumors? Because once we've done our due diligence and we've completely debunked it, it's kind of like it might be best not even to talk about it,
Right.
because it's like, some of them are, especially like the big ones that have caught on online, are just such BS that anyone who's going to choose to believe it is still going to choose to believe it no matter what we say, because they're in that kind of conspiracy world where they just don't believe anything we say and just think everything's a cover up and everything's this. So it's kind of like most people, when they're watching this documentary, have not even heard of some of these rumors. So it's like we just want them to learn about Heather. So it's kind of like, why put that garbage in their mind when when it's not true.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I've been experiencing something similar this week also in regards to the Puff Daddy case and also tying it to Epstein, and they're trying to say that a former housewife is involved who actually sued Auntie Lawyer about it. So that there's court documentation and he had to retract that, and even with all of that proof, and knowing also the person behind the rumors was somebody who was very misleading, still people just don't want to believe it. So I think you guys definitely took the right approach with the movie and not highlighting that.
Yeah, we do mention it, touch upon it near the end, but we don't give it an incredible amount of light because it's kind of like there's no reason to be on the defensive. Like, it's kind of like just because someone makes something up, of course, there's that part of me that wants to stand up on the top of a mountaintop and be like, this isn't true. Like, this is
Hmm.
so false. But at the same time, it's kind of like sometimes it's best to not really respond or to kind of present, like, here's the real story of Heather. And so you will know it's not true because you are seeing the real story and you're knowing that this is just, there's no way this could be true. So it
Right.
kind of makes it this weird spot. And even like you're saying with, the hard thing about the internet is that even when someone retracts something, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like you put it out there and it goes out there everywhere. And then like a week later, oh, there's a retraction. This is false. No one sees that retraction. It's already
Yeah.
been republished and talked about. And like, people are not going to see the republication or the retraction. So it's kind of it makes it why it's, again, it becomes kind of tattooed. But it's kind of like throughout the years with Heather, of course, the tabloids always would have a lot of stuff to talk about Heather, but that would just like about the poltergeist curse or whatever salacious kind of thing they want to make up or kind of put together that kind of will sell newspapers. But then the thing is, it'll be gone off the shelf in about a week and no one remembers it. And then
Right.
the internet comes on and then all of a sudden it gets tattooed on there. And so it's just there to stay. And yeah, so it's a lot harder for families and people when it comes to rumors and such, because they don't go away. It's just there, forever, versus like, at a newsstand for a week and then in the garbage.
Yeah, it spreads like wildfire. I was listening to our friend's Cassandra's podcast today, and she had Aaron's Carter's fiance or mother to his child when he passed away on, because there's all of this speculation going around with his passing and if it had to do with Puff Daddy again. Sorry, it keeps on coming back to Puff Daddy. But she was also explaining how hurtful it is to see all these elaborate speculations and rumors that are going on about him, which are clearly false. I just think sometimes people don't think about, oh, it may bring me excitement and dopamine in the moment, wondering if this is true or not. But think about the person that it's written about. Think about their family members that it may affect. I just don't think enough people think about that.
Yeah, well, of course, like, when they sit there, and that's what happens, like when they try to play like armchair detective, like when and they probably comes from a good place. They're probably thinking that they've linked a couple things. So when something big comes out, like a P. Diddy story where there was all this stuff going on, and then you can pull people from like Nick Carter, or sorry, not Aaron Carter, where it's like, he passed away, he's gone, he's can't defend himself, and now you can sit here and try to link him to that, and all of a sudden he gets like, you bring it up and you put it in people's minds, you put it out there. That's the whole thing with Heather. I mean, Heather's been gone
Mhm.
for 35, 36 years, and then if something comes out about something completely unrelated, all of a sudden people try to link her to it, like, oh,
Right.
maybe, because they want to sit there and think, who else maybe was a victim of this? Oh, maybe Heather was, because Heather died in 1988 and she was starring in movies around these people, maybe, and this could possibly have happened. So, and then all of a sudden, according to them in their brain, it did happen. And it's kind of like, people start running with it, and then you have people online who kind of believe it also, like agree to them and say, oh, that does sound like a good that could have happened. That's maybe what happened, and Hollywood cover it up and conspiracies, and that's kind of what happens. And then all of a sudden Heather's name gets brought up again. And the thing is, people think they're just talking about it, but then it gets back to the family. And just,
Right.
imagine, like, you lose your daughter, you lose your sister, you lose, your niece. Then all of a sudden, and how she passed, and it was very traumatic for you, and you knew her, and you knew her story, and then all of a sudden, some stranger is trying to create a narrative that she was, abused on a set, and it's kind of like, no, she wasn't, and like, it's just to bring that up is just to even make that, not even like reaching out to the family, oh, maybe is this true, or they're just more just like, okay, we're just gonna make this up, and she's not here to defend herself, so it's a victimless crime,
Right.
and just not thinking that she was a human being.
Hopefully, the more people hear these stories, they will take more consideration into it. I was guilty of it for a long time as well, but it's been a good learning moment.
Yeah,
Um,
no, definitely. I think a lot of people, that's like even what we've seen, like, people, it's funny when, especially when it comes to Heather, they're very strong. Like, I mean, there's times when I would like try to push a little bit where someone would say, like, oh, she was abused by blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah, believe me, I know. And then I push them like real kindly. I'm like, so how did you hear this? Oh, well, I read this article online and it was by a reputable person and I know it's true. Well, what was the article? Well, maybe it wasn't an article. It was like, maybe it was a comment that I saw, but I don't remember. But I think it was about this. And then I'm like, oh, so you don't really know it's true? No, I guess I maybe don't. But I mean, it just, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, you were just so strong a minute ago saying that for sure she was abused by so and so. And now as I'm talking to you, you're kind of like, well, maybe she wasn't. That's kind of like, that's just kind of what you run into. It's like we're just
yeah,
waiting, just in general. I mean, I don't really want to give too much light to these things, but it's more just like, at least if there's any even circumstantial evidence to anything, just like present it. Like if there's anything, I'm all ears. I'm listening, and that's what we were doing this whole time. It's like, hey, if you think she was abused or something, what somewhat evidence do you have? And the more you poke, there's literally nothing, like nothing. Like no
Agreed.
one, yeah, well, no one she worked with has ever been accused of anything that we know of that like, is real. So there's not even, like I said, circumstantial. It's not like, you had someone who was arrested for something. It wasn't like she worked with P. Diddy. So I mean, it's like, so it's kind of like she wasn't even around it. So like, where are you kind of pulling this from?
Right. People just need to put a little bit more thought and research behind it and also think about what some of the consequences should be. But Brian,
Tune into the buzz, it's the talk of the day. From Bravo shows to the latest celeb spree. We've got the tea, come sip it with me. Dani, gossip girl, pop culture expose. We're spilling all the secrets every